Hello, everyone. We're just waiting just a few moments to allow for our Psy.D student to get here. He's actually coming from class and he'll be joining us shortly. My name is Ebony Schamberger. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Divine Mercy University. And it's always nice to know where everyone is joining us from. So we actually have a chat feature. You can submit your city and state into the chat. And if you have any questions now that we can just go ahead and prepare for, feel free to leave them in the chat as well. Let's see, what is the cost of the program? Okay, I see one question coming in now. So that is actually something that we went over a little bit last night. So the program is 122 credit hours, and each credit hour is a little over $1,000, and that's for the span of 5 years. So the full cost of the program, I'm going to pull it up so that you can actually see that. Here it has the actual total cost without the fees and indirect expenses. We also allow you to have the federal aid program, accommodate you, veterans aids, internal scholarships, and different cash plans, private funding, agency organizations. So here's a list of our scholarships, and we're actually currently promoting our early admission scholarship, which is a bonus scholarship. We don't offer that all of the time, but if you were to apply before October 29th, you would qualify for that $3,000.
Great.
All right, so I'm happy to have you here, Isaiah. I think that you do a great job of introducing yourself. I was just here in the meantime, but I'll stick around in the background and allow you to answer all the questions that's here.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I'll just introduce myself briefly. My name is Isaiah Lamb, second year Psy.D student at DMU, originally from South Dakota. So the East Coast has been a fun adventure for me and a change. So happy to be here and answer some questions. First one I see, do students work while in the program part-time? So I don't know, Ebony, if the assistantships were mentioned, but that is an opportunity for Psy.D students, is to, through the university, have an opportunity to work 10 hours a week and get money added to their tuition or taken away from their tuition costs, basically. So that option is available for people. If you're asking more about part-time outside of the university, that's something that is, it is possible, but it's very, very difficult to pull off in a lot of ways, just because you would have to have very, very flexible scheduling with whoever you're working for. Your first year, when you're not doing as much clinical work, it's more feasible. But as you go through the program, it becomes a lot more clinical based. And so your responsibilities get more, they get more clinical. And so you're gonna have to be spending more time in the clinic doing work like that. And so it gets a lot harder to work part-time outside of the university. So the assistantships are helpful in your third and fourth years because you're TAing for classes. It's already kind of related to what you're doing as opposed to doing something completely separate. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, here's one. I already have a degree in psychology. What else can I do to qualify me for the Psy.D program? Yeah, so that's a great question. Obviously, the base knowledge of psychology is going to be incredibly helpful. We actually don't, that's not a prerequisite for joining the Psy.D program. Obviously, you have to have some sort of desire and passion to work in the field of psychology. But as far as, yeah, it's not necessarily a requirement to be in the program. So if you're looking for other things to qualify you, I would say interpersonal like skills or something that you might want to look at. And just really examining how you relate to other people, because the Psy.D is clinical based and clinical focused. So you go through this program with the intent to be a clinical psychologist, doing therapy. And even if you don't end up doing that full time, it is a part of the program. Like, you're going to have to be giving therapy to people. So I think what's going to be really helpful is your interpersonal style, and just taking a look at that. When you go through your interviews, that's something they're assessing. Like, how do you relate to other people? Because psychology is a field of relationship and understanding between each other. So that's really important. There are statistical like realities of the program. So a Psy.D is not research based like a PhD, but there are like research requirements. You're going to have to be doing a dissertation. There are research design classes where, don't worry, you don't have to be, incredibly gifted with stats, but it is something you're going to have to be prepared for. So just having a sense of numbers and that sort of thing can be really helpful for that.
I would like to ask if maybe you could share a little bit about your gap year from undergrad to grad, and maybe how you think some of your your experience may have attributed to being a strong applicant.
Yeah, of course. So for me, between my undergrad and applying to DMU, I spent a year doing homeless outreach in Denver. And for me, that really, for one, it solidified my desire to do psychology and to pursue it as a career. Because when you're working with the homeless, I mean, oftentimes you come across mental illness in very profound ways, sometimes in ways you wouldn't even see in a clinic because it's just so severe. So for me, that really strengthened everything. I had the opportunity to go out every single day and just sit and have conversations with people living on the street and experiencing homelessness. So for me, actually having an opportunity to see mental illness firsthand was very helpful. And that's experience that I will pull from for the rest of my life. But especially in this program, that's been really helpful to actually get out there and find ways where you can encounter the suffering that people are experiencing in the world and learn how to sit with that and be with people in that. So that might be an example of things you can do to help prepare, is just starting to build those relationships with other people. Okay, let's see here. What are the key things I need to focus on when it comes to the admissions process? Okay, so probably related to that last question. Let me think about this. Been a while since I did my own admissions process, so I have to think back to it a bit. I think some of the things I was just saying, just being aware of your interpersonal relationships and how you relate to other people is very important. I think there are some essay questions that really just talk about and ask you about your desire for this field and to identify the reasons why you want to pursue psychology. So that's really important. I would say don't go into that just thinking, I'll just write something down and hope it goes through. It's something you really do need to think about deeply, because the Psy.D program it's 5 years. It's intense in a lot of ways. And you want to set yourself up for success by really taking the time to ask yourself, okay, why am I doing this? And what do I plan to do? And how do I plan to incorporate this into the rest of my life? So I think that's a very important thing. They're going to ask you about it in interviews is, okay, well, why psychology and why not counseling? So if you don't know all the differences between those two, that's something you need to look into. They're just kind of, they're similar in a lot of ways, but there's differences that really set them apart. So being able to articulate why and how you plan to pursue those things is really important when looking at admissions. Okay. Let's see here. How do you balance personal life and your education? That's a great question. And that's a question that I think we should all be asking ourselves, whether it's education or just jobs in general. How are we taking care of ourselves and giving ourselves the best opportunities to succeed in things. For me, I'm a very social person, so it's really necessary for me to just find events, even if it's just once a week or once every 2 weeks, to just go out with people. Sometimes that's just going out to eat. Sometimes it's just one-on-one conversations with other people. There are certain moments where you have to sacrifice that and just get your work done. But for me, I've found if I have discipline in my routine, I'm able to actually uphold a personal life and enjoy the company of people around me, and also do well at my work. So I think discipline is probably kind of the answer to that. And that's something you can start thinking about, is how can I become more disciplined in my work, and and to focus on the things that need to get done.
And I thought that I just jump in and say, you're also the president of the Student Leadership Committee. And I'm sure that requires a little bit more discipline than normal. Maybe even just sharing a little bit about how you're able to work with your cohort or even the student body and provide entertainment for them or just educational events. I know that that's also another thing you're balancing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so for me, the Student Leadership Committee is kind of this organization within the program that advocates for students, and it's like meant to develop the students professionally and academically. And a huge part of that is taking care of yourself and finding that balance. So for me, I have it's kind of interesting, the paradox of I have this extra responsibility to be on this committee, which advocates for the care of students in a lot of ways. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. But I think what's important is finding the things that bring you life and fulfill you. And so for me, organizing things and having kind of an administrative role in things really brings me life. And so that's important to me. And in some ways, even though it's a responsibility, it actually helps me do well in other things because I'm doing something that I love when I do that. So yeah, we'll put on events. We have one coming up. It's kind of a professional development where we're going to be looking at resumes and getting some input from faculty on, how do you tailor your resume to this particular clinic? Questions like that. We have a service event as well. Like I said, I did homeless outreach. So we're planning a homeless outreach day, I think next week. And so, having that responsibility to find these opportunities for others to really engage in the community and tap into that inner desire to serve, to be with others, and to be excellent in the things that we do. So let's see here. A lot of good questions. Holy cow, they just keep coming. This is awesome. Okay. What is the age range of people in your cohort, and what has helped you most in your preparation for this program? So age range, my cohort in particular, I would say most of us are between, there's some of us that came right out of undergrad. I was not one of them, but there's a few. So probably anywhere from 22 to, I think we may have one person that's maybe early 40s. Don't tell them. If I can't tell what their age is. I think it's either late 30s or early 40s. And so that is pretty typical. There's no age limit, really. I mean, you have to have a bachelor's degree. So that's kind of the one requirement for the program. But generally, most cohorts, I would say, are in that mid 20s to mid 30s range, with a few exceptions. So I would say that's the majority. What has helped me most in my preparation for this program, honestly, being on the streets with people, doing homeless ministry, that prepared me because I saw it. I saw the mental illness that was there and present, and it allowed me to grapple with, how is this something that I can do going forward? And for me, feeling like I could, that really prepared me in profound ways. I know not everyone has that opportunity, but for me, that was very moving. Okay, which courses are most grueling? Which year is most grueling? That's a great question. Year 2 is pretty widely accepted as the most difficult year, which is what I'm doing. So pray for me. your prayers for me, please. So, and part of the reason that that is the case is that your first year starts very academic heavy. In fact, that's really all you're doing is you're just doing academic classes. Once you start your second year, you're now taking on clinic responsibilities. So DMU has an in-house clinic that the second year staff. So at this point, you have your pretty heavy academic load. And now you're adding on clinic work. And then also in your second year, you're beginning to look at dissertation topics and beginning work on that. So that's just kind of another thing you add on top is, okay, your dissertation doesn't have to be done your second year, but you really got to start getting a plan for that and how it's going to be laid out. So that's the second year. The classes that are probably the most difficult would be, now you might have some variance depending on who you ask. Statistical courses can be pretty difficult for people just because it's not always people's wheelhouse. They're not as comfortable with statistics. So those can be difficult for people. But I think maybe the most labor intensive classes would be the assessment courses. And these are the class I just actually got. That's the class I was running from. The few minutes I was late, I was in my assessment class. So we learn how to administer psychological assessments. And there's just a lot to that. Learning how to look at the data and then make interpretations based on that and apply that to the person that's in front of you. There's just so much, there's so many moving parts involved with it. And it's a really beautiful process, but it's complex and there's a lot to it. So I would say the assessment courses are probably the most difficult. And it's not even difficult, it's just, time consuming and giving yourself time to wrap your head around it.
I do see some students walking around with these briefcases, and I'll ask, "What's that?" And they'll say, "Well, this is a child assessment kit." I think it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about that and share. I don't know if you've done those assessments just yet, but you do have like some gear you have to work with.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the one you're probably referring to it's called the WISC. So it's the Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children. And so that is one class that we take on assessment. There's a sequence of 3 assessment courses. The first one you take is focused on cognitive and behavioral observations and assessments. So when you're working with kids, there's different ways to measure different abilities, different reasoning abilities, attention spans, those type of things. So those briefcases that you see, Ebony, sometimes they're filled with like, I wouldn't call them toys, but there's like manipulatable objects that help with that process to assess that. I can't actually reveal too much because an important part about assessments is that they're kind of, if you know how they work, then they're invalid, and you can't get the results that you want. So there's a level of security that we actually have to have with assessments and not letting people know how they work, type of thing. So yeah, but very interesting. I absolutely love assessments. Okay, another question here. Do you work in groups a lot or more independence required? Now, this is actually, it's kind of up to your cohort to decide how much you work together. I would say my cohort's a little bit more independent. There were certain projects where we collaborated when we were able to. There are certain, there are definitely assignments where it has to be individual and you can't collaborate, and that's made very explicit. But there are other opportunities where, yeah, we'll get together and we'll kind of make a study guide together and go through it so we can be prepared for exams or something like that. So some group work kind of depends on the cohort and what people want. All right. How is the doctoral experience different from a master as far as homework reading time? I can't actually speak to that because the Psy.D program, I didn't do a master's. You don't need a master's to start the Psy.D program. You get a master's along the way as a part of the doctorate program. So this spring, I will actually receive my master's, assuming I make it through and survive. So I can't really speak to the difference. I have a few friends in, like, say, the master's in counseling program, and that is difficult. I mean, the readings, I would say they're comparable as far as amount of reading. But the problem that people run into with those programs, the hybrid programs, is that they're trying to work also while doing, um, they're trying to work full time while doing a counseling program. And I think that's more of the issue. Whereas in some ways, the luxury of the Psy.D program is that I can just focus, like, school is my job in some ways. I do a few things on the side, but like most of my time is devoted to that. So readings, there's a lot of them. And I would say that's probably close to maybe how a master's goes, but just a lot of in-depth reading and a lot of different subjects as well. What is considered full-time? I guess I'm not sure how the distinction is made between like a counseling program and a Psy.D program, but full-time, I mean, you're putting in at least 40 hours of work in a Psy.D program. So I suppose that's kind of what makes it full-time there. And like, yeah, so maybe to paint that picture a little more clearly, in the Psy.D program, I'm taking like 5 classes right now. I have friends who are doing the online masters, and they're taking 1 or maybe 2 classes at a time. I think 2 is kind of the maximum that you take. So there's just a lot more. We're taking like 16 to 17 credit hours every semester. So just generally more time put in. Okay. Oh my gosh, so many good questions. Trying to get through all of them. Student experience outside of classroom. I'll speak a bit to that. So we're in the DC area. There's a lot of opportunities for social events. I'm one of the more social people in my cohort. So I'm always like going out, and I was in like DC last night hanging out with people. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of just do whatever you want, to join young adult groups. There's a lot of hiking around here. The mountains are fairly close to Shenandoah. So people like to just kind of adventure and see nature, as well as just attend various events in the area. So that's pretty fun. A lot of opportunities in this area. Maybe I'll come back to some of those, but I want to make sure everyone's questions. Can an individual with a PhD in educational psych be admitted into your Psy.D? If so, at what level? Okay, so what I think this question is getting at, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and you can apply, even if you have a doctorate, you could certainly pursue another one. What I think the question is getting at is there a way to transfer credits? There are some classes that transfer. I think you can only transfer up to 18 credits from other programs. So that there is a possibility for that, but that's not ever really a guarantee. So you'd want to be checking in as you apply to see what classes may possibly transfer. Generally, those are going to be more of your basic classes like psychopathology, maybe research design. Trying to think of other classes that might transfer. So just, yeah, check in if that applies to you, and see if there might be some room for credits to be transferred. Okay, how are you finding the financial management of the program? Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll be straight up, it's not a cheap endeavor in a lot of ways. For one, living on the East Coast, like I said, I'm from the Midwest, so everything is cheaper there. I mean, I remember I had rent for like $250 a month when I lived in the Midwest. So living out here where things are just a lot more expensive, it is. It's a lot. It's a change of how you view things. So just being out here is expensive, and then the program itself is, I mean, it costs money. Certainly, the scholarships are very, very helpful. But I think the most important thing about handling the financial aspect of it is you really do have to start viewing it as an investment. You're gonna have to, like, in some ways bite that bullet and say, okay, I'm gonna go into debt over this, unless you have fantastic finances, leading up to it. But to really view it as an investment is like, okay, I'm putting this money and this time into it with the trust that it's going to pay off in several years. And that can be very difficult. I think the world we live in is, we don't tend towards that. We kind of just want the results immediately. So really shifting to that mindset of this is an investment. And more than that, it's an intense investment. I really am putting a lot into this, but knowing that the outcome will definitely be worth it. So for me, I will share that I have taken out loans. And so I'm kind of relying on those loans to provide for me at this time. But also just speaking about the field of psychology, if that's any concern, like there's job security, like you'll have a job for the rest of your life. I mean, if you look around at the world, like there's just so much brokenness. And so just finding security in that, and knowing that there's just so many opportunities for you. And the debt thing, I really do think it's manageable. I don't think that should be I think it's a very important factor, but I think you have to keep in mind the end goal. Hopefully that speaks to your question there. Okay, questions about library resources, technical assistance. Yeah, so the library, you get help from that kind of just as you request it. So we have an online library system where you can access databases all the time, 24/7. And if you need a book or an article that we don't actually have, yeah, the librarians are incredibly helpful. They will get it. Sometimes I've had the article given to me like an hour later, or if they have to like send for a book, it'll be in a few days. So yeah, very helpful in that way. They kind of just help you out when you ask for it. So kind of your prerogative to reach out for help there. Okay, trying a couple places for questions. I intend enrolling in 2023. Is it too early to begin registration? Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I don't think applications are going to open for 2023 until that would be like next summer or something like that. So 22 is the focus. I would start maybe looking at things. Obviously, that's if you're attending this panel, then you're kind of beginning that process.
Definitely start applying for those scholarships. Since you do have a 1-year gap, that would be my top recommendation. Outside scholarships.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be good. Just start looking at everything and getting a sense of how it's all going to go. What could be the average number of persons admitted? So I think I'm gonna give a ballpark estimate. I think that 20 might be the maximum for a cohort, give or take a few. The average cohort is generally closer to 15 or 16. So that's generally what you're going to be looking at. I think as far as this year with COVID and everything, we had one smaller cohort that just came in. But generally you're looking at, yeah, I would say safely, 10 to 16 is a good range of cohort size, which you're going to find is really helpful. It's enough to get to know your cohort really well, but not, yeah, it's not too much and it's not too little where you just feel like everyone's secrets or something like that. So, okay. Students ask whether they can transfer credits from their MSc, Masters of Science in Clinical Psych, I assume their program. Yeah, that's one thing. If there's specific credits like that, that's probably going to be a case-by-case basis. It really depends on what they are, what the credits are. If it's like DMU is obviously very philosophically and theologically oriented. So we have our own way of teaching that and introducing those ideas. And so we probably, in that realm, we won't accept really credits from other places, even if they're philosophically minded. It's because our mission is so specific and has like its own system, basically, that we won't, every student needs to take that class here, basically, so we can ensure that we're getting the information that we want to provide in that way. So as far as credits and transferring, definitely case by case, I would reach out to the rep for that. So let's how does DMU combine the theological perspective with the psychology aspect? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of how to break that down, because that's such a rich question, and really that's what we spend 5 years doing while we're here, is learning how to put those two together. So I think philosophy being kind of the basis of how we evaluate things, right? We have to get this idea of who the person is and what they are, and that's our foundation, and theology informs that, right? We know it's been revealed to us that humans are inherently good, and we were made by God and made in his image, and so because of that we are very good. That alone transforms everything in psychology and therapy, right? Because now, instead of this random clump of cells in front of me, for lack of a better term, now it's like, oh no, this is a person. Like, this is someone who reflects God and has such like incredible dignity. It just transforms the way that you look at a person and how you interact with them. So just from the very beginning, that first principle of life being and humans being good and filled with profound dignity is where we start, and then we just build from there. Learning how to incorporate like emotions. Emotions are important to us. Our desires are important. The passions, they make up who we are. And so like just sifting through how that relates to a person's psychology. We're made to be interpersonally relational. We learn that from the Trinity, right? Like God is relational, love is relational between persons. And so we transfer that to psychology and we say, well, if a person doesn't have relationships, then there's a part missing from what they were made for, right? Like they were made to reflect God and be communal and have relationship. And if they don't have that, there's a defect there. So it's just taking all these truths of theology and philosophy regarding the human person and like, okay, now how do we implement that? And where that's lacking, how do we speak to that and help a person grow, say in virtue, and lead them more towards their flourishing as a whole person? So hopefully that gets at that question. 5 years to learn, to begin to learn all that. It's really a lifelong process of incorporating, God's design for creation and psychology. A lot of good things there. Okay, what advice would you recommend based on your overall experience? As far I'm taking that as far as applying to the program. Yeah, I think, like I said before, just really taking time to reflect on what you want from this program and if this is actually what you desire and why. I think that reveals a lot about you. I always kind of joke with people. I did my undergrad in psychology, and I would always kind of joke like, oh, I'm studying psychology so I can figure myself out. And I was like kind of joking, kind of like honest. And that's kind of the thing. In undergrad, it feels like people are just trying to like figure themselves out and solve their own problems. And that's really important. But I would say at this level, it's not the best approach to have when you're starting a program like this. I think it has to be others oriented. There can be parts of that. Of course, we want to know more about ourselves and why we work the way that we do. But I think the more important thing is learning and just looking in yourself and saying, why am I actually doing this? Is it to help others? Is it to serve others? Or is it really just like, I want to figure my family out type of thing? So really just questioning your motivations. I think that's going to be very helpful in deciding whether this program is for you or not. Also, just taking a look at the practicals, right? Like you have to move all the way across the country. You have to move to the East Coast to do this program. So is that feasible? Do I think I can handle moving to a new place? All those sorts of things you have to take into account. And yeah, a lot of big questions, no doubt there, but just start grappling with those and being honest with yourself and asking those questions. Okay, are you able to find reasonable accommodations nearby for adults and family? So I personally don't have my own family in the area. I'm a single person, so I'm not married. I do know several people who are married and moved even to the area to start this program. And it seems like they have been able to adjust very well. The Northern Virginia area is actually quite family oriented. So there's a lot of opportunities for good things there. Yeah, I would say just opportunities in every regard. Like, this is such a populated area, with DC being close and other major cities being close. You can pretty much find anything that you need out here. So does DMU offer a post baccalaureate in psychology? I'm actually not 100% sure post-bac what that means. I can say pretty certainly that we don't offer that. We just offer the master's programs and the doctorate program. If you're asking about like a postdoc, which I'm not sure you are, DMU doesn't offer those. Those postdocs would be at other sites throughout the US that a person could apply to. So yeah, so I guess I'm not 100% sure how to answer that question, but I can say that DMU just offers the master's programs and the doctorate program as areas of study. I'm not sure you're able to audit. You may be able to audit classes, but I think those are rare exceptions, and that would also be a case-by-case situation. Can you do the course in 4 years? No, not really. So it's a 5-year program, and I guess there's a couple ways to think about it. So one way to think is it's 4 years of academic work and then 1 year of internship. So in some senses, it is 4 years of class, and then you go, and the internship is a program where you apply to different sites throughout the country, and you kind of match. If you have any familiarity with how med school works, once a person graduates from med school, they apply to these residencies throughout the US to start specializing in things that they're interested in. And the psychology program is very much like that, except you don't get your doctorate until after you finish that, until you've gotten your hours for that. So internship, very generally, yeah, that's how it works. Those are paid. So it depends on the site. Like I said, there's different sites throughout the entire US that you can apply to. Some pay better than others. Some don't pay as well. They do pay you, and you're generally able to cover your expenses. So that's something to keep in mind, is you do move to the area for 4 years, and then in all likelihood, you'll be moving to another part of the country for your 5th year for your internship. But as far as the sequence, there's really no way to do it any quicker. There's just so much involved in the training that I personally don't think it would be healthy to try and make it go any faster. And that's tough because like I said, I think nowadays we tend towards wanting things very quickly. And I feel that way myself, right? We just want to be done with it and get the degree. And it's something where you definitely need to put the work in, but it's all worth it. Maybe just say a little bit more about internships. Internships can be any state, basically. Yeah, throughout the country, there's just several opportunities that people apply to. Those can be at college counseling centers, those can be at hospitals, just a wide range. As you get into the field, you get a sense of how much and how many different opportunities there are in different populations that you can work with. So that kind of covers that. Let's see here. I feel like I've got most of these questions. Okay, I see Ebony's sharing the screen there. Yeah, so that's kind of a run through of how everything works through the program. So you'll find that as you progress, as you get closer to that internship, your work shifts more from academic to being more clinical. So you get a lot of the theory up front, and then you start applying it, and then you eventually move towards externships, working out in the community. And then finally, your 5th year, for all intents and purposes, you're working as a psychologist, but you're not licensed and you don't have your degree yet. So it's just getting that final training before you actually get your degree. So let's see here. A lot of good questions. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any other questions. If you have some more, definitely feel free to type those up. It's, and I do want to just take an opportunity to say, as you're looking at coming here, I think the logistics and all of the details of things kind of, take over, and that makes sense. And that's a really important thing. You have to make sure that you're able to do it, that you have that's a practical opportunity for you. But maybe to just speak a little bit about the results of it and the experience of actually doing it. For me, it's just been an absolute gift, and I have definitely enjoyed it. It's not been without its challenges, but like, what good thing doesn't have its challenges, So for me, all of the discernment of, costs, relocation, just all the details that you're talking about, the interview process, worrying about that, it's all just been so worth it for me, and it's just paid off. I'm only my 2nd year, but and as I start as a therapist in the clinic, it becomes more and more clear that this is what I meant to do, and being in those moments with people and their suffering and seeing hope come into those places, it makes all of the trouble worth it. And so again, that discernment process, if this is what you feel called to do, and you think that this is really what your life is aiming towards, then I can say, and I feel this way, that all of the work and the struggle that goes into it is absolutely always worth it. Yeah, so just wanted to share that piece, because it can be easy to focus on just the logistics of things. Let's see here. Good relationship between students and lecturers. Yes. Kind of speaking to that, the small size of cohorts. And we don't have a huge faculty. I think there's probably around 10 Psy.D faculty. So you definitely get to know your professors very, very well. And oftentimes you'll have the same professor multiple times throughout the program. So that's one thing I love about it. I just love developing those relationships with my professors and really getting to know them and seeing them as humans, which sometimes you don't get the experience of. If, like me, my undergrad was a big university. So you get some, if you sought it out, you could get to know your professors somewhat well, but here it's very different. You really feel cared for, and that they're looking out for your well-being. Okay, another question here about vacation time. This is a good one and good to be aware of. It's good to think of the program as kind of like a job, in that you will certainly get breaks around Christmas between terms. But your summers are going to be a lot more limited and have a lot more responsibilities. As you get into clinical work, you are starting to work as a clinician. And so, unfortunately, you can't really take a month off to go do things, because you have clients to attend to, and you need to be around and being able to provide for them in that way. So your first year, when you're doing when it's academic work and not so much clinical work, you have really nice breaks. You get a great Christmas break. The summer before you start your first year, you have to enjoy, but then after your first year, you start working in the clinic during the summer. So sometimes when people are in between externships, they get more of a break, because maybe one externship ends in May and the next one doesn't start till August or something like that. In that case, you get a free summer, and that's really great, and people love that. But it's best to not rely on that and to kind of view it as a full-time job. Once you start, you'll get occasional breaks, but generally it's full-time. Okay. Let's see here. Seems to be a lot of questions. Maybe just leave a couple minutes in case there are any more questions, but yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing all of that information. It makes me understand the student experience even more. And I used to wonder, why am I seeing students during the summertime? And you kind of answered that. So
Yeah, exactly. It is, it's a full-time thing and takes a lot of commitment, but like I said, it's all worth it. So, all right, I see one last question here. Can one be admitted with GRE results pending? I don't believe, I'm trying to think here with the GRE. I think you can be interviewed with unofficial results, but there has to be at least unofficial results given to qualify to be interviewed, but they cannot make a decision until the GRE scores are official, because that is a part of the decision process. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. Great. I don't know if there's any more. I know we have a few more minutes, but okay, late admission. As far as late admission, I mean, once the deadlines have passed, I think those are pretty hard deadlines. I wouldn't count on that being the case. So I know that I think there's, and Ebony, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are 3 deadlines. There's one in October and then 2 in the spring semester. So I would really aim for those, because at a certain point, you're not doing yourself a favor by not being prepared and not hitting those deadlines. It's
and
something
also the earlier you apply, the more scholarships you qualify for as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you just want to put yourself in the best position possible there. And just, if you're thinking about it, and you're thinking pretty seriously about it, I would just, start the application process as soon as you can and then go from there. But I wouldn't count on a late admission. Great. These have been great questions. Really enjoyed this time with you guys. Yeah, thanks. Like I said, it's a great program, and there's a lot of wonderful things about this school and this program in particular. So I definitely just encourage you, like I said, ask those questions about yourself. This is really what I think I want to do, and does it feel like I have the ability to do it? And then go for it. That's going to be a huge thing, is just taking the initiative and going for it. I think that's incredibly important. And for me, that's been a huge thing, is at a certain point, you just have to take the leap and just do it. So great.
All right. Thanks again, Isaiah. And I know that I hope that you ate lunch already before you head back to your classes. But if you haven't, hopefully you can grab something to eat. I've put a few things in the chat that if you haven't been paying attention to the chat, please make sure you write down the application fee waiver, which is code CCMMP 1999. That's so that you do not have to pay the application fee. So then what's there to hurt? There's just go for it. And if you have any additional questions, our admissions rep in the interim is Steve Showalter. His email address is sshowalter@divinemercy.edu. And you can also give him a call. His cell is 571 290-7580, and he can receive text messages at that number as well. But I do again thank you, Isaiah, for your time. Hopefully you won't have to run too fast to your next class. And we'll be sending a recording just in case you missed anything. So you all have a blessed day.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.